In Golden States of Grace, you profile religious communities that a lot of people might be less familiar with. Why did you choose those communities?
Well, I chose mainstream faiths for the most part, but I chose marginalized communities. The mainstream faiths were chosen specifically so that the groups that are profiled were not easily dismissed. These are folks that are on the margins of society, but they're following, for the most part, mainstream traditions, Mormonism, Judaism, Catholicism, what have you. I felt it would help build that bridge of people understanding that there are folks who are living on the fringes, living outside the mainstream, who still adhere to some of the traditional faiths that we have going on in America.
What are some of those faiths and what are some of the groups? Could you tell us more
Sure.
about them?
Well, we have a community of Zen Buddhists inside of San Quentin. These are all inmates. Some are lifers. Some are in for 5, 20, years. We have a transgender gospel choir, Christian base, which is in San Francisco. There is a Native American tribe up in Santa Rosa, which is using song, language, dance to kind of reclaim some of their heritage from 200 plus years. The Miwok and the Pomo tribes, which are now the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria. There is a Jewish halfway house for recovering addicts here in Los Angeles, which is using a combination of 12-step and Torah study to help aid them in recovery and move forward spiritually. So there's 11 total. 8 faiths are represented. 3 different groups follow different Christian faiths: Pentecostal, Christian, General Christian, and Baptist.
How did all of these groups arrive in California? Is it particularly welcoming, or is it simply because we're a diverse state and a lot of people end up here?
Well, the basic fact is we are the most diverse place for faith in the world. It's kind of a staggering thought. I mean, we're a lot of things in California. We're the engine of agriculture, but we're also the most diverse place for faith. Some of these people actually migrated here. The folks in the Baptists and Pentecostals in the Central Valley who are really quite rurally isolated, that are documented, they're all descendants from the Okies, from the Dust Bowl. But the Jewish community here, Beit Teshuvah, for example, people come from all over, and these are people who self-identify as Jews. The truth is that they bring with them, I think, more about an understanding of community and how you forge community against the odds than they do anything that's, let's say, kind of a surfer or a California-based thing. I mean, the truth is I think this state is particularly welcoming for people who are doing something on the vanguard. It's a place where you can go upstream and still find a home for yourself and for those around you.
What was the reaction of people who we might describe as being more in the religious mainstream, or people who don't believe, to Golden States of Grace?
That's a great question. I have found at times being a little disheartened how this body of work as a whole will be introduced to a faith center, let's say in Washington, D.C., that talks about interfaith. And they're, on the surface, extremely enthusiastic, and then they look closer and they find 1 or 2 groups that they have to judge. They can't accept as people that deserve or are grappling with spirituality in a paradigm that they can understand and not have judgment about. And so I have honestly found that the book is interesting because it is meant to feel like a little bit of a sacred book, with all the prayers woven through it and all the stories woven through it. Hopefully people take it on a journey and often in some ways leaving their judgment behind as they go through this. But I can honestly say, as the exhibition has traveled and as I've been, brought up to different people as a speaker, sometimes they really get caught on the fact that, I'm sorry, we just can't deal with transgenders, or we can't deal with people with AIDS, or whatever the case may be. And it's really, that's why this book is there.
And I believe you end with sort of a broad American prayer, I believe you told me. Tell me more about that.
The American prayer is something that came about in a really interesting way. The exhibition was completed, and it was about a year till I found the publisher. It ended up being the publisher that did my first book, The Migrant Project. And in that time, I was able to conceive of the book again as something that felt like a contemporary visual prayer book. And in doing so, I realized each of these people who was incredibly articulate. The exhibition travels with a soundtrack of their own voices. And those voices, I felt, were not only articulate in word, but in writing. So I asked each community leader if they would send me prayers written by these individuals for the book. And those prayers became, I think over 3 dozen of them, become the connective tissue of this book. And in the end, a friend of mine was sitting with me and helped me come to the realization that there were phrases in every single one of those prayers that jumped out. There were words that were universal. There were words that were they just kind of rose to the top. And I actually took those prayers and I cut up the pieces like a jigsaw puzzle. I laid it out on a table in my studio, and over 2 months, every time I'd come in, I'd kind of adjust them a little bit and find a rhythm or find a phrase. And these phrases, often one sentence is made up of 3 groupings of words from different prayers. And in the end, the American prayer at the end, maybe something that I've put together. I can't call it written or that I'm the author of it, but it's the summation of this. And it's been really quite moving as I've done readings and receptions and events around this. That is now the closing piece that I leave people with. And it's really incredible, whether it's a student in a small college in Wisconsin, or it's somebody dealing with addiction here in Los Angeles who's in this halfway house, or last night as I was in prison presenting this back to the prisoners, the inmates at Chino Women's Prison. They really are quite moved by that. It seems there's a universality that it touches on, a sense of spirituality that goes deeper than all the different faiths and into something very visceral. So my goal is to bring the work back to as many of the communities as it came from, and in doing so, it's an entirely new journey, and that to me has been pretty thrilling in just the short time I've been doing it.